Hi everyone, it's Catherine here from Minky Finger Cat. I'm really in the mood for recording a video today for some reason. I'm actually on my lunch break. So this probably won't get finished in one crafting session because I rarely take longer than half an hour from lunch. I have the luxury of no meetings until later this afternoon, so if I do take longer, I do take longer. That's the joys of working flexibly. But I suspect it will take longer than half an hour to do this project. But I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing yet. But what I wanted to do was first inking of the stamp. So this was a new stamp that I got. It's a My Favourite Things. It's called Fanciful Roses Background. I remember liking it, but I can't remember what it looks like. So I thought we'd play with that. And I thought I would try stamping it a couple of different times, and then we'll see whether I end up making it into a project. So I suspect the stamping will be done in my lunchtime. The making it into a project will be done as a separate session, but obviously it'll all be one video for you. Okay, so I'm gonna turn you around because I've now got the clamp all wobbly and now I'm gonna have to readjust it, so that was a bit daft. But yeah, I'm gonna do that for you now and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so if you're doing a background stamp, something this big, you absolutely need to be able to stamp it more than once. So absolutely using my stamp platform here, and this is me just testing out the stamp and almost priming the rubber. So I'm stamping it in archival and just did it on some scrap paper, but I do end up using that later on. Anyway, then I chose some hot pressed watercolour cardstock. It did need stamping a few times, not quite giving it a cardiac, what do they call it? Not doing CPR. There you go. That's whatever CPR stands for. But yeah, it did need stamping a good few times before I got there. So the first one I just stamped in a brown archival, and the second one I stamped with Versamark, but because I didn't clean it off, the archival still showed through, and then used a gold embossing powder. The second one was on a random watercolor cardstock, whereas this is hot press, so this is a lot smoother. The other one was has got a little bit more texture to it, but also it's a little bit thinner. This is a much heavier cardstock. So the first medium I chose to play with were these beautiful shimmer watercolors. These are dead cheap and cheerful from Hobbycraft. I'm pretty sure I bought them from Hobbycraft, but you can, yeah, Hobbycraft or the range, somewhere like that. I've had those for ages, but I just pulled them out because they are really pretty to play with. I'm thinking this would be really pretty if I stamped and embossed it on black and then used the shimmer watercolours, because obviously they have got that shimmer in them. They become a little bit more opaque than normal watercolours. But this is the first one I start to play with. Apologies, I occasionally take the picture out of the frame as I'm painting, just because I forget that I'm on camera, because I kind of lost my concentration and went straight into the, oh, let's just get on with it. I did grab my heat tool to just try and dry some sections off so that I could carry on and not run the risk of the green going into the sort of the pinky beigey colours that I had chosen. Yeah, I just fiddled and I just got on with it, really. Probably took me about 15 minutes thereabouts to get to this point. And yeah, it's pretty, but it's a bit messy as well. Oh yeah, I felt like the middle one just needed a little bit more of an over thing. Anyway, it's a bit messy, and I decided, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to splatter. But what I didn't want was splatter to be all over the picture, the actual roses themselves. So I used that piece that I had stamped onto scrap paper, and I just roughly fussy cut. So it isn't fussy cut, it's roughly cut. I think unfussily cut, I don't know if there's a word for that, but it's just to basically block out those shapes of the flowers, because I didn't want too much splatter going on to the flowers themselves. And then I chose the colours that I had been painting with in order to do some splatter, dried it, added the mask again, and added the third colour. So 3 different colours of splatter, and then set that one aside to dry. Right, this is the embossed one, And again, just choosing them at random really. I chose my Inktense pencils. So I'm adding in the two colours at the beginning for the flowers, and I've chosen a yellow and an orange. I do add in a little bit of a sort of a red colour at some point, but that's later on. So the Inktense pencil, I'm just roughly scribbling them across the petals, and then I'm using my brush and some water to just activate them, move the colour around, trying to keep the, rather than it being one big block of colour, that some bits are more yellow and some bits are more of the orangey colour, but it blends so beautifully. I was really pleased with how this worked. And then because it's got the embossing, even though it's only a very fine line of the embossing, it does kind of work at giving it some kind of walls for the water to butt up against. So it means that sometimes you could get the yellow right next to an orange patch, but they didn't necessarily blend together. So at this point I am adding in the colour for the leaves and the branches, but I hadn't got quite enough, so I decided to scribble onto that piece of scrap paper, which is very soggy, add some water to it and just use that as a sort of palette. Did the same here. This is for me to add in the red, just to add in a little bit of depth. And this is where I got to.
Okay, so a few hours later, done the rest of the day at work, had a little rest, had my tea, came back and decided to make this watercolour, shimmer watercolour one into a card. I knew at this point I would not have the energy, and also this was probably going to be a long video, so I'd rather do the other one in a second video. Anyway, I started by trimming it down, trimmed it to 5.5 by 5.5 inches, and then added a mat of craft cardstock that I thought worked quite well with the peachy colours. But I wasn't sure how to finish it off, so I sat there for a while. Then I decided to grab some dies and to die cut two stitched circle frames. And I thought that would be interesting. Then went and grabbed my pouches of ready cut die cuts, including this, they're sort of like stitched leaves, which I thought was a kind of nice contrast to the sort of watercolory background and having some quite bold leaf elements. So I grabbed a whole load of those. I also grabbed a label die cut and then found 3 peachy coloured hearts that I would use to embellish. I then decided I was going to die cut the circle out again in vellum, so that would create a sort of like a background, but you could still see through it to the pattern behind. Okay, I am now layering up. I'm realising that after I'd layered up my frame, that the circle I'd cut was the smaller circle, and I needed the bigger circle for it to actually sit behind so I could hide the adhesive on the vellum, so I had to go and die cut it again. And now I am just creating my little clusters of leaves. And I find the best way to do this when you are trying to do them on a frame or something is to create the cluster. And you can see there I've got my frame actually underneath the acrylic block so that it can dry, and then I am putting the clusters on top, and then I glued the back of the cluster, back of the frame, and picked up the clusters. Keep putting it underneath the acrylic block to dry. So at this point I think, right, what sentiment? And at first I was going to go with congrats, but I just hadn't got one that was already done in either gold or brown colours or green colours. I'd only got black and it just didn't look right. And I also decided that label didn't look right white, because it kind of needed some contrast, a little bit of contrast from the sentiment. So instead I watercoloured it with those same shimmery watercolours. The sentiment that I chose was one that is from an Old New Kit, Splendid Bouquet, and I had already stamped, die cut, etc. all beforehand. So you'll have spotted there that I gathered some threads. These are embroidery floss that I just happen to have on hand. They're sitting on my desk because I just found some in some tidying up that aren't part of a set or whatever. And I adhered everything down, including those little hearts, and decided that was that. Obviously I've still got this one to go, but as I say, that'll be on a different video. So, hope you enjoyed me making that card and stamping and watercolouring. I had lots of fun. Please do like if you did, and please drop me a comment below, and obviously subscribe if you want to see more videos. But until next time, goodbye.